Good morning, everybody. Today is the 12th day in the month of April 2022. My name is Heritage Adisa, market analyst at Hot Forex. And quickly, as usual, we'll check through the market to find out what the big stories are, what the overall sentiment is, if they provide opportunities, and then how we can take advantage of it. But please remember that this is just a communication material. And nothing in this communication contains or should be considered as investment advice or investment recommendation. Users acknowledge that investment in FX and CFD products is characterized by a certain degree of uncertainty, and that any investment of this nature involves a high level of risk for which users are responsible and liable. What we have this morning in terms of the overall environment in the markets, right? It's a more, weaker sentiment that's continued over the last couple of sessions. We had it yesterday, had it on Friday, where we had, overall weaker environment in the market. But so far into this session, most of these moves are not really flowing the way we would expect them to, mostly disjointed, which is something we need to also consider while we trade. And what are the reasons for this negativity or weak environment that we have? There's been continued worries on global growth, global economic growth expected to slow down. Apart from that, you have high inflation amid central bank tightening, which obviously is not good as well generally for markets. You have geopolitical tensions continue in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. Excuse me. And then that's also that to worry about. And then you have rising virus cases as well in China amid lockdowns. Even though in today's session we had a little bit of, slowdown in the numbers, but I mean it's still very high. Lockdowns is still very much in play, and that clearly, ports to the overall weak environment that we have. Generally, equities is down. They're still continuing the downside we had so far, and the VIX is up, which obviously points to that more negative environment. But you see, look at oil prices, pushing high after finding the floor, and FX trading all over the place, right? Despite the downside you have in equities, normally when you have weakness in equities, you expect the likes of Australian dollar, the likes of New Zealand dollar to also weaken when you have downside in equities. But so far today they are up, and the reason why they're up is we've had commodity prices in today's session also pushing higher. Commodities like iron ore, like copper, even oil prices generally, all of them pushing higher, most of them across board, which obviously is good for commodity currencies, particularly, in this case, NZD and AUD. The CAD is not really following suit, not as strong compared to its counterparts, compared to its fellow high beta commodity currencies, even despite the fact that oil prices are pushing higher, right? And that also, points to markets feel around the Canadian dollar, it's really heading into the BOC meeting. With the hike by just 25 basis points, it might not really be enough, just like market expects, it might not really be enough to propel the Canadian dollar up some more, but it will come to that, later during our morning sessions. But that said, the dollar remains supported generally. The dollar still remains strong. It's been for a while now because we've had anticipation for tighter monetary policy even faster, even quantitative tightening as well, and hikes up to neutral with around 2.25 to 2.75, before the year runs out, which is a lot. Considering they're still they're still around 0.50 right now. So clearly that's also a positive for the US dollar as well. Apart from that, you have rising yields still supporting the dollar. But on the other hand, Japanese yen continues to be weakened. Earlier we had reports from officials, we had comments from officials that it's just trying, job on the currency, basically talking about monitoring the FX rates, all of that. But still, with that, JPY was not able to find some form of strength in the back of that. The weakness in Japanese yen continues. I wouldn't just like to chase, Japan JPY crosses to the upside, like to see deeper pullbacks for looking to get into that. But there's that to pay attention to. On the geopolitical side, there's really been increased fears that Russia is considering or has used chemical weapons, even though that is not confirmed officially yet. But there's talk around it, there's comments around it. Apart from that, Austrian Chancellor also had a meeting with President Putin of Russia earlier, and then he also said from the meeting generally overall, he didn't really, have any positive impression generally from the meeting. So that has still been a very big cloud, considering that yesterday we had reports that President Putin has already set for himself a 4-week deadline to achieve some form of victory in Ukraine. So clearly, all of those bad news obviously is not good for the euro, neither is it good for the British pound. And we've had them weaken so far in today's session. So I had this written down earlier. Let's just quickly look across board and then we can get running, right? You look at the equity space, that downside continues. Even in today's session, we're finding some form of floor, unable to break, lower and continue down. But I mean, it's what we're still seeing. That weakness continues. You look at the likes of the Dow Jones as well. Similar story there, downside still continues, even though we've just failed to really, create fresh lows into the session, which is something that makes me a little bit more cautious about. But there's that to pay attention to, even the Nasdaq as well. Similar story there, but finding some form of floor, which just makes me a little bit more cautious. On the oil side, we've had oil prices really just find a floor from yesterday's session, push higher. Better still, the UK oil also bounced back above, the $100 per barrel level, which is also a nice key barometer level, to key level of supports there, to pay attention to. Now that we're back above that, that's good. Clearly, the tensions in Europe clearly is a good input for oil prices generally. Why is that the case? Because it's impedes supply, it reduces supply, it causes tighter supply in the market, which clearly is good for price. Having said that, you cross over to the FX space. The fact that you have AUD, yes, doing okay, but equities are not so strong. You have NZD doing okay, but CAD is not doing so fine. The dollar is fine. You have the likes of the Euro pounds weak, but mostly in the middle there. But usually you see Japanese yen pressured. The moves are really just disjointed, and then it brings a little bit of more caution so far into the session. Yeah, we could look at buying the AUD in line with higher commodity prices. But how about equities? If they could push higher from where they are right now, if they could push higher from here, then I would really like to see something like Euro AUD push even lower. Like there's something like Euro AUD even push lower as well. That would be interesting for me. But what I like to see really would be a break below this key level. Let's just quickly go to where you have currencies and then look at Euro AUD. Good. Now we talked about this level. Let's just see how I can clean this up a little bit. All right, let me see. All right. I'm looking for how I can clean this. Okay, just in clean terms. Now we talked about this particular pair. A couple of, I think it was yesterday we mentioned it. So we talked about this overall, overhead trend line resistance level, right? An interesting one there. If you just want to make this a little bit cleaner, just clean it up a bit. Where we said that, having this in mind, I really like to see further downside on this particular pair, right? My entry was around 1 point. I think this was 1.47. We've not really tested that particular level, but we're seeing, downside from that particular pair right here. So clearly is still, I'm missing out on this already, but if I can get a pullback, I would prefer it before looking to get back in. But clearly we've already gotten very close to it. I'm making to see further downside on this particular pair, especially if the tensions keep getting worse. But in today's session, if I want to still go into this, I like to see clearing out of this and clear out this overall level here around this 1.46. You can see previous highs going back to, I think, European session on the 7th of April, as well as even American session on that same day. Later, the highs of the next day, that's 8th of April, that was Friday, and then on Monday we had a low, and now we are currently finding some form of support here. So if we could get a retracement back to this level, I would like to see that for the downside, or better still, if we clear this out, retest this, then there's clearly more room, to downside on this particular one. We had one currency pair on our mind that we talked about yesterday. Just want to do like a review on that before, we head out. Just quickly, right? We had this particular pair on our mind yesterday, and I'll explain why I took this particular trade and why I got in and I got out. Yesterday, we had the euro strength in the day, early in the day. We had, mostly a weak environment, which clearly should support the CHF. And then we talked about the reason for the strength in the euro as one of the victory for or the lead by Emmanuel Macron, the current incumbent president in France. And then we said that, yes, that was a positive, but I remember saying that, the gap is not so much. It's even tighter compared to the last time they had that election, and then it wasn't really breeding so much confidence in the euro, particularly when we see have so much tensions in Europe packed into Russia and Ukraine. And then I said, yes, we had that strength, but I remember looking at this and saying, coming back to test this levels, low, and then the highs here as well. Key level here around this key round number around 1.02. I'm really interested in selling this. Yes, we could talk about strength in the euro, but the reason behind it is not so strong, and I expect euro to still weaken against, the CHF. So I took the straight sell on this, and I wrote it down to the lows for mostly late, the previous week where you had. Right, you look at what we have right now, you see clearly this levels here. I mean, super interesting one. So I got that around here, about 50 pips, down on that. And then we pushed lower. So now we're retracing that level back to this region as well, testing, the previous lows, which is also another interesting one for me. So this session we have, mostly moves that are not so solid, highly convincing. But that said, I'm not still running away from this. If the tensions continue to build up, negative environment continues to exacerbate, I would still like to see further downside from this. Even though right now my convictions are not so strong because of the environment that we have so far, but it's something that you can also have a lot of mind even going forward into this session. Having said that, on the calendar today, it's a light one. Yes, US CPI later today will be interesting. Just quickly, US CPI will be interesting as well. We're expecting hotter numbers, across board. Clearly, that will be one to pay attention to. It means if we see hot numbers, it means that the Fed are really right in the tracks to even tighten further, which is still a good input for the US dollar. But clearly, we want to see what that looks like later in the day. But apart from that, we have a couple of central bank speaks, drawing that back on the wires. But apart from that, nothing so major, to really latch onto so far in today's session. So we're going to keep it at that. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask, and we'll always do our best to help. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your training session. Bye for now.